Hi everyone, it's Dexter from AutoCAD, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Fine-Tuning Your AutoCAD Sheets. Technical consultant David Gerber will be presenting for us today. So before we start, we'll just go through about AutoCAD, all about fostering innovation through consulting and training. AutoCAD Technologies plays a vital role in helping infrastructure, building, mining, construction, architecture, and manufacturing industries reach full potential by delivering technology solutions and support services such as education and consulting. We work with visionaries to shape the future of design and in turn enable them through innovation to minimize risks, improve productivity and achieve excellence. AutoCAD Technologies is considered the business partner of choice and trusted advisor by vendors and clients. We partner with major software and hardware vendors to meet the client's technology needs. We strive to exceed client expectations by pinpointing their challenges and delivering solutions through experience and innovation. We work with clients and companies of any size nationally and abroad. Over to you, David.
Thanks for that, Dexter. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, sweet. All right, so fine-tuning our AutoCAD sheets. So there's a couple things that we're going to talk about. So the first one will be title blocks. So in there, we can have a look at the sheet numbers and names. We can also have a look at some project info, and I'll show you a few different ways to deal with revisions. We'll also have a look at the sheet set manager because it's pretty powerful for various different things. So again, it'll be dictating that sheet number and name that we have adjusted in our title block, but we can also create custom parameters. And then named views. Named views are really good because we can use them both in model space and paper space. So they can quickly be translated into our viewports in our paper space, but we can actually also use them in the sheet set manager for another powerful tool. In terms of some drawing names, we'll just basically create it into a block so that we can reuse it. And we'll just play around with the different fields that we can have in there to make it a really smart little block. And we'll have a look at some annotative text just to make it a bit faster in our paper space. So that's basically just to deal with scaling issues in our text. And then one extra one will be the project navigator. Okay, so in terms of our title block, kind of what I mentioned before, we'll have a look at that sheet number and name, some project information, and our revisions. So if you have a title block or if you don't, you can always just use the Autodesk one. So if you select it, you can see kind of all the blue and the grays, and that just means it's an attributed text. So if we just double click, we can actually get into our attribute editor and we can see all the different values that they have. And here it's gray, and that's because it's a field. So either you can insert a field or you can actually edit the fields themselves. So if we just go and edit this one, for example, we can see that it's under the date and time category, the create date, and whenever it was created. And you can check and you can put whatever kind of format you want. So again, project info is similar. It's just going to be picking out the fields from our actual sheet set, which we'll set up in a little bit. And then you can have a custom parameter that we can create. So all these are pretty much the same. They just have their different names and their different areas that they sit in, and then their different fields that we can adjust. So again, A03 was just coming from our sheet set, which you can adjust and it will automatically adjust, which is really handy to start to use these types of fields and the sheet set together. So I'll just cancel out of this. And then we can also, if you did want to, you can technically change it in the properties. But if you note, like once I just like hit enter, you'll see that that gray value goes away. So it's not really smart anymore. So I would probably avoid doing that. I'll just Control Z to get out of there, and I would adjust it in the sheet set manager instead, just because that way you can just always reuse it. In terms of revisions, there's a few different ways to do it. So we can either just use basically a little block. So just this one over here, and it doesn't fit perfectly in this title block because it was created for another one, but just as an example, we can basically just put it into kind of place. And then this one just has visibility parameters. So it'll have a little drop down. It's just set in the block itself. So if I go into the block, you can see the different visibilities. So as you start to get more revisions, the issue dates and the comments, etc., come through. And then if we actually look at the block, it's just dictated with these little drop downs, and then you can just add them if you need to. So you can either put that on top of the block, or if I just get out of there and I edit the block itself, I can actually nest a block within the block. So I'm just going to put it back in. And now if I just close out of this, now it's just basically sitting in my title block, and I can reuse the title block everywhere. And if there was ever a revision, I could just go back, edit the block, and then just use it as it normally was with their little drop down. This one obviously isn't scaled properly, but that's all right. You could just move it down. And again, we'll just save out of this. And then it'll just appear in our title block. So obviously I'd have to reverse the visibility. It's not working for this title block, but you kind of get the idea. So I'll just get rid of this because I'll show you a different way. You can also use Excel, and then I'll actually show you the proper way how it actually shows up. So we could just use a table, and then we'll just say from a data link, and then we'll just basically create a new data link. And then after this is done, you can just always reuse it. So we can just name it what we want it to be. So we'll just keep it fine-tuning webinar. And then it'll just ask us basically, where do you want to save it and what kind of path it needs to be. I'll just quickly put it into the appropriate area. And now you can kind of see what's in the Excel. So that's what it's reading. If I bring the Excel over, you can kind of see what it looks like. So I just basically made a template in Excel, and that's what you'd just be using in your office. We can also link it to a range. So we don't want to see the revision comment date because that's already in our title block. We just want to see the bottom portion. So we can actually just say, like, for example, A2 is where it's listed in Excel to C2. And if I do a preview, you'll see that it only shows the B. So you can quickly start to manipulate that. So as soon as I put a 3, it'll bring that A down. So if you didn't want to show all of your revisions, that's one way to do it. So we'll just say OK for now. You'll see that preview there. We'll say OK. And we won't adjust any of the other settings, but you can adjust extra settings if you wanted to. And now we can insert it in, and we just need to scale it. And you can play around with how it fits in your title block afterwards as well. So it does act like a table. So example, if I just stretch this here, I can fix that font. And again, we can change the sizing as well. I won't bother doing that now. I'll just move it off to the side just so that you can see it, just as an example. So now that we have our template basically set up for our revisions, we could just go into Excel. We can just select our second one, insert a row, and then we'll just say revision C. And then maybe our client just had some extra stuff that they wanted us to do. So we'll just put in our comment and the date, whatever date it is. Just make one up. And then we just have to save it. And now it's basically an XREF. So now if we look in our XREF panel, we can see it's there, our fine tuning webinar. And then we could update it that way. Or we can also, you can see now it's picked the appropriate information that we just put in. You can also go within it and download from the source. And that will just update it. You can also change, if you did want to see that A again, all we have to do is just basically adjust the range like we did before. So if you did want to hide some stuff, then you basically just use this range tool to do that. So very quickly, if you do have a bunch of revisions, you can just basically hide ones that aren't necessary anymore. And yeah, so that's 2 different ways of doing revisions. And we'll look at another revision with our sheet set manager. So which is the next thing. So again, we'll play around with the numbers and the names, and we'll have a look at that custom parameter, which will be that revision one. So within CAD, we can either, so basically we're going to play around with those title block fields that we saw before. So you can see the tags that we have just from before, and it is very picky. So just make sure you either basically note down what the custom parameters are if you've created them yourself, or I usually just take a screenshot. So I just quickly take a screenshot and just kind of have it off to the side while I'm building my sheet set manager. And then eventually you won't have to worry about them. It's just the first time when you're setting it up. So we could just go to sheet set manager if you like to type stuff in. But if you like to click, it's just under our view, and you'll kind of see it in the middle here, sheet set manager. It'll open up another dialog box, and now it'll either be your old one, or in this case, we'll create a new one. So once you already have it, you can create one from your existing drawings, or you can actually just find ones that are out of the box, basically from Autodesk, and just manipulate that one. So again, we can just select the one from Autodesk. We'll just do that metric one. We'll say OK. And then in here, you can put all the information that you want to be using. So we can even move it into an appropriate location to basically just find it a bit easier next time. Maybe you have a custom directory for your company, just put it in there. We'll just name it what we need it to name it. And then we can also set the sheet set property. So those are the parameters that we screenshotted from before. I'll just spread this out so you can kind of see all the information that it's housing. Basically, we can set up all the information. So it can even start to take stuff from our title block, and it can take stuff from our template as well, so that new files are always created in that template. And these are all those custom parameters that were in that current title block and the values. So now when we adjust the values in here, it'll adjust it in our title block. We can also edit them and create new ones. So those were the ones that we screenshotted. It's pretty easy to edit ones. So you basically just add it, name it whatever you want, and then just have a look at these bottom ones. So there's sheet set and sheets. So a sheet set will affect all of the sheets in there. So it'd probably be something like revisions, because you want revisions to show up on all sheets. So just have a think about where you want these parameters to be visible. If you, like, for example, for a sheet, it'd probably be something, I don't know, like a drawing name, for example. It wouldn't be the same drawing name on every single sheet. So that's kind of the differentiation between the two. I'll just cancel this for now, and then I'll show you an example in a bit. So yeah, basically you can start to fill out information in here, and it'll reflect. So we'll just continue. It's basically just going to tell you what you've generated and what's going to show up in your sheet set, and basically just say finish, and it's in here. So under our architectural one, we can import some layouts, and we'll just import from our file that we're working on at the moment. We can browse for that and just find where it's sitting. And now you'll see that it's these two, which are on the bottom here. These are sheets that we've created in the file, and it's going to bring them in. And now we can kind of see all the different information about them, like when they were created, who's like even using them. You can see the little lock, which means that someone's in it. And then we can start to rename and renumber them in here if we need to. I'll just bring this over. So for example, right now it's A03, so maybe we want it to be A02. And then we can go to the next one. We can adjust those later if we wanted to. So yeah, A01, and we'll say okay. And now if we regenerate, so just REA will regenerate all, you'll see that that's changed to O2 because that's what we've changed it. And you can see kind of the name. So if we did want to rename that tab, we actually can in our layout tab here. And we could just, maybe we want it to be our ground floor plan. So we'll just do that. And we don't need to adjust that one, but you'll see now in the bottom here, our floor plans tab has changed. So that sheet set manager is pretty powerful for a lot of different things. So let's just add in here, we can adjust our parameters. So maybe we'll just do this one, fine tuning webinar. And now if we just, we'll put a project number. I don't think there's a project number in this title block, but that's how you would adjust them. So if we REA it again, which is regenerate all, you can see it comes up. So let's just add a couple more just so that we can kind of see it. How it's kind of acting. So we'll just change our project name there. And we'll just put fine tune just to kind of differentiate it. And REA again, and you'll see that it's fine tuning. Again, you don't have to do REA. You could basically just switch tabs between the file, and it will actually work anyways. It'll regenerate by itself. So for our revisions, we'll just create an attributed definition. So revision number, and again, remember to just note down how you've wrote it, and we'll just put a default A, and we'll just put it in our title block and just save out of it. So now it's in here, and we can go to our properties. We'll edit, and we'll add one, and in our name, it'll be our revision number. and we want it to be sheet set and a default value. So in here, we could just put A for now. We'll say OK. And we do need to @sync it. Sometimes the attributes don't always come up, so we just do @sync, and then we just select our block. And now you'll see that A will appear once we say yes. So now it's there. We will need to adjust it now so that we can link them. So again, we'll just go into here, attribute, we'll insert a field. We'll go to our current sheet set under sheet sets, and then our custom, because we created a custom one, and we can find it here, revision number that we just created. So now they're synced together, apply, and you'll see now it's gray, which means that it's an attribute. So now if we go into our properties, go here and change it to B, say OK, and regenerate or switch tabs, it'll be B now. We can also create new sheets based off of all of this information. So you don't only have to do it in that tab itself. Maybe it's a separate one. Maybe it's a structural one that you want to create, and you want them to use that same title block and all that information. So it'll be using that in that path and that template, basically. So now you'll see if we double click on this, it'll actually open up its new file, and it has all the information that we've put into it. So it's a separate file. It's still using all of our project information. So it's pretty powerful to use the sheet set manager in various different ways. Named views are also very handy. So we can quickly create views, and we can use them both in model space and paper space to help us just be a bit faster. So it translates into our viewports, but we can actually use them in our sheet set manager as well. So sometimes, basically, it's just in our view, and you can see all of your named views that you created, and we can do a new view. So if you do have a pretty busy model space, this will help. So if we want to kind of zoom in on our kitchen, and we'll just define a new view because you can kind of see it's way too far. So now we can just specify where we want it to be. So now it's a bit closer, and you'll see it's kind of highlighted. Just hitting enter will get us out. Usually that's enough that you need. If you did want extra properties, there are extra properties in here that you can look into, but usually it's enough to not use them. So I'll just say, okay. So now, like say we do have a lot of drawings. Now we can quickly zoom in on our kitchen and find all of the details. So if your drawing does get busy, it's helpful there. So in our paper space, if we do create a viewport, we can do it. Basically just create our viewport and just double clicking in there, and it's going to act exactly the same as I just showed. So if we just go to our kitchen, you'll see that it zooms in on our kitchen. We might want to change our scales, and if you don't have the appropriate scales that works, just go to custom. I'll just drag this over, and we could just add a new scale. So I'll just say 1 to 100, 100, and we'll just kind of make it neat, and we'll go down and change it. And we'll just adjust this a bit better. Sometimes they're picky, so I like to take the snap off, and just gives me a bit more leeway to move. Okay, so now we have our view, and that's basically what I did for these two above. I just had the named view, so if I double click again, I can start to move between them, and you can see how quickly it adjusts to there. So no more, we don't have to kind of scroll through our whole entire model looking for that exact view. And then again, we can also use our sheet set manager. So if we just add a new location, and that's basically where our file is housed, it's going to find those files and all of our views that we created from before. So now if I drag and drop from here, it's going to be 1 to 1. So it's a bit big, but we can just easily change that. Just select it and just change this to 1 to 100 that we did before, and just regenerate, and just move it into place. The good thing about this one is once I put it into the appropriate area, you'll see that it actually comes with the little named title block that it created, that Autodesk creates for you. I'll just move it over. So you'll see it's created, it's our second kitchen view. So that's why it has number 2. but right away it's already there, and they're attributed as well. So it knows that it's a 1 to 100 scale. And then we could just adjust these, the view number if we need to, and you'll see it applies. That's the name, it's attributed. And that's basically just taking it from our sheet view. And then again, similar for the scale, it's if we just go into here, edit, and sheet view, and it's just basically viewport scale. So it's a smart block. So as you start to adjust it, it will adjust as well. And we'll touch base on that in a second once we actually go and actually build one. So you'll see how it works from the start. If you did want to adjust it, there is a view manager. So in here, there's basically all of the views that we have created. We can edit the boundaries if we wanted to, if they were too far, and we can basically just edit the name if we needed to and adjust all the different settings. So have a look in here if you did need to adjust it. All of the views will be in this little view manager, and that's in the same area. So where we were creating a new view. And similarly for the layout views, whatever we've put into it from like that drag and dropping action, it will be in its own little area here. Okay, so our drawing name blocks. So similar to that, that basically out of the box Autodesk One, we can create our own. So we can put in our attributed text, we can add some fields, and then we can make it into a reusable block, which is very handy. So in doing that, basically we just need to use attributed definitions. So @def if you like to type. If not, just in your home under block, there's this little tag here, and just that's the one. We can say what our tag is. So we'll just do our basically our drawing number at the moment, what our prompt is, so that you know drawing number, and then a default. We will eventually add a field into that, but just for the time being, we could just put just numbers basically. We can adjust how we want our text to be. So we can say maybe this one will be in the middle center, and then we can just change. For this one, I'll just change text heights, but you can make a text style as well if you need to in your company. So I'll just quickly make a circle. Again, this will be adjusted to however you like to have your sizes. But just as an example, just need to put my snaps back on. And I'll just extend it across. Okay. And now we just want to move this in. There is a really cool tool called M to P. So basically it'll be middle between 2 points. And then it's going to ask us for the first one and then our second one. So we can actually find our little quadrants. And then it will give us a little block at the top. And now it'll always be dead center, which is pretty handy. We will create another attribute. And this will just be our sheet number. And just basically tell people what it is and our default, and then adjust our settings again. And our height. And again, just using that M to P just because it's very convenient. Okay. Now we need a title for our drawing. So again, @def. And just a prompt so people know. And then this, we'll just put title for now. It will be a field eventually. Just change the text height. Okay, and I'll quickly just show you that field. So again, you can still insert fields into here as well. So eventually it will be an object, and then we'll just basically select that viewport, which will be that named view. Okay, but just for now, we'll just put title so you guys can see it. And we'll just put it where we need it to be. And just create a few lines just to basically center stuff a little bit better. If we select our nodes, then we can actually see where those insertion points are for those attributes and just use that to line stuff. Okay, and our drawing scale. And again, this will be, we'll add a field into there as well. So if you do make a mistake, which I'll show you right now, let me just snap it to the appropriate area. So for example, I did that wrong one. You can actually adjust that in the properties. So don't worry about that. Don't delete it. Just go in here and adjust it accordingly. So it'll be bottom left instead. And also try and stick to just 2 snapping options. It just makes CAD work a little bit better. So I had 4 at the moment. So I'm just going to turn that off and just keep it at 3. 3 is usually okay. So we can just highlight this all and create a block. We'll just name it so that we can reuse it later. And I would specify the objects just because attributes and the base point attributes are very picky with the order. So we'll just say that's where we want to insert it. But just make sure, because in the properties, how you want it to kind of show up, it will be affected with how you start to select them. So the way they line up there will be selected. So just kind of think about how you want them to show up. Otherwise, you'll have to explode your block and redo it. You can't adjust that later. So I've selected the order I want them and then that. So you can kind of see the order that I selected them in is showing up here as well. Okay, so now it's a block that we can reuse. And let's just move it in here to kind of show you an example. So now that it's attributed, we can actually just double click and start to adjust it like we did before. So in here, our drawing number, let's just get rid of that. And then in here, we will use the field that we've played with before. And we'll just go to our sheet set and our sheet set number. So it's pulling it out from that sheet set manager, which is very handy. You can do uppercase if you want to, just to make sure no one does lowercase. In terms of our title, again, we'll just use our field. Insert our field, change that from sheet set, objects, named object, and then we can see our views. So these are, again, we can use our named views. So I'll just probably just do the same one, window detail. Okay. And now lastly, our scale. And we can use that field again. So let me just add a field. And we'll just pick an object, select that, select the block. And now we'll just say custom scale and our scale. Okay. Apply and okay. So now that's ready to be used basically. So if we ever did adjust this to 1 to 50, and I'll just regenerate it, you'll see that right away these 2 scales are changing. So I'll just change it back. And RA again. And you'll see it quickly changes. And that AO2 is basically coming from that sheet that we adjusted. If you did want to adjust the line, we can also do something there. So basically I need to add like a distance length parameter to it. So we'll just go into our parameters. We'll select our parameter, like basically where it's going to be. So we want the distance of that line to change. We'll just call it a stretch. Ask us for the parameter, where we want it to start, and what we want to stretch. And we'll just say enter. Okay, so there's 2 grips at the moment. So that it doesn't confuse people, we can actually adjust that. So we just need to go into our distance and check its properties, and we can just change that to 1. So now it's only going to be on that right side because that's what we want. If we test our block, we can have a look at that now. As we drag this grip, it will change the line. Let me just go back to the appropriate one. So now in our drawing, it's basically just given us a bit extra stuff to work with. Again, if you want to make that a bit better and so that it's a bit more uniform in the office, we can actually start to adjust that distance. So just as we did with our grips, we can actually change our distance type to a list. So that way it's only a certain distance. So let me just bring this over. And you can start to add distances. So maybe we want to do 40, 50, and 70. Okay. Okay. And we'll just close this and I'll show you how it looks now. So now in here, once we go, you can see it gives us a little guide. So it will only snap to those distances. So if you have set drawing names that you always use, maybe figure out the distances that it works. That way, basically it's just uniform in all of your drawings. Because otherwise people with the first one, they basically the lines will always just be different. Cool. Annotative text. So a lot, like, I guess usually the way that I worked, I would put stuff that would always be changing. I'd do my text in model space, and stuff that's not changing, such as those drawing name title blocks that we were just playing with, I'd keep that in paper space. We could still do that and use annotative text and efficiently scale within our paper space so that they're all uniform. And we can also create macros and put them into our tool palette so that we don't have to really worry about thinking too much. So if we take this, for example, in our annotate tab, let's just create a text style just so that we can create an annotative text. Create a new one. Annotative text, okay. And we'll just check off annotated, and we'll just say that in paper space, we always want it to be 2.5 centimeters. We can change the font and font style if we want to. So I'll just set this one to current so that it's always using that one. Okay. And you can see at the top now it's always using that annotative text. So now if I do text, and I will just put my text in, not many people know, but you can actually change the style of the scale within model space. So now everything that I draw in terms of my text will be 1:25. So I'll just put my text in here. And this will always be in 1:25. If I go to my other drawing, maybe this one here, which was 1:50, I'll just change this to 1:50. And again, I'll do my text, and it's still taking my annotative text. I won't rotate it, and I'll put that in, and it will be the appropriate size. And you'll see how that works in a second. So you can see it's annotated 1:50, and paper space is 2.5, but model space is 1:25. If I go up to here, and I just need to escape quickly and then go back, you'll see it's 2.5, but it's 62.5 high. And I'll just create one more before we go into paper space so you can see how this is working. Change it to 1:100 because that's what this one is. And again, just put my text in. Okay. And again, this one's 2.5 and 250 on model space. So what this means in here, if you look, they're all different scales, but the text is always going to be printing the appropriate height in our paper space. So the reason why I like that is just because if I ever do move a viewport, at least all the text is always with it. And if I do, just take note, see how I changed that scale. If I did need that text to appear at different scales, maybe you're reusing that area, just take note of that. We can fix that issue. I'll just quickly go back into our model space and I'll show you that. This one here. So at the moment, it's only 1:50, but we can actually add a scale to it. So we'll just add another one, 1:25. Okay. And now if we have a look at our text, when you hover over it, you can kind of see that there's two of them now. So if we go back into our floor plans, and maybe we reuse it for 1:50 and for 1:25, it'll adjust the text. And you can see that they're the same height again. So it's always constantly readjusting the text for us, and we don't have to worry about changing it. Okay, so one way to make this a bit smarter so that we're not constantly, because ideally we would be wanting to work in one-to-one in model space, so we can actually put stuff in our tool palette. So I have like all my different details in here. So like my primary titles will be bigger and so on. I've created the text to be a certain height. So let me just open up a file that actually has my text styles. So you can see as soon as I click on this, so it's 1 to 10, as soon as I click, you see it changes to 1 to 5. So I have a macro in there that's doing that, so I don't have to worry about it. So as soon as I go into my properties, you can see this is the macro. So I'll just expand it a little bit bigger. So you can see. So the first thing it does is basically CC. So I'll just quickly show you what canoscale is. When I click on this and change the scale, you'll see at the bottom here, it says underscore canoscale. So that's basically that model space scale. So that's what I'm doing. I'll go into my properties and I'll just expand it again so you can see. So basically CC is just like cancel. So that's like escape. So it'll cancel any commands that we were doing before. Then it's going to go to canoscale and it's going to change it to 1 to 20. And then again, we want it to cancel that. So cancel. And then we want it to put our dim, like our layer that we want our text to be on needs to be whichever we want to specify. In this one, it's this layer. And then we'll say we want it to go, the next command is our text, and we want it to use that text that we created. For general purpose, it's just general. And then the font style basically is at the end. So it's pretty smart. So now as soon as I click here, again, it's going to ask us for the rotation, and then we can just start to type, and it's going to be that appropriate size in the appropriate scale. So as you can see, I go to 1 to 10 and it's changed our scale to 1 to 10, and it's changed that text again to 1 to 10. So we don't really have to think about that. So it's going to work exactly as we had here, the 2 different or 3 different rather viewports with different scales, but we just don't have to think about it. We can do the same thing with leader tags. This one you can't do commands. However, you can play with the scale. So let me just bring this over. So in here, so I did create this one 1 to 10. I probably should have did 1 to 1, but that's all right. So that's just at scale 1. If I go look at my 1 to 5, I basically just halved it. So 0.5 scale. And then so on for the other ones. So if I bring in this leader tag, for example, which is 5 times the size, you'll see that it's been adjusted right away, and I just don't have to think about it. I can just put my tag in and do it. So linear dimensions will be similar, which is handy. So again, you can just copy paste that command, and it's just a few different things. So it's basically our dim layer is changing. And if you don't have a layer, you can actually create a layer and its color, and what type of style it is and what type of dimension it is. So now our 1 to 50 detail dimension style will be that big. And if I go to my 1 to 5 and I go here, and I can just click that, and now it's that size. So you don't have to constantly be changing them up at the top or constantly changing it in the properties. Basically just create a tool palette that has that information. It just makes it so much faster for when we're annotating stuff. Okay, I'll just quickly. Just a second. I think that's all for, yeah, that's all for annotative text. Cool. So one extra one, if you do have the AEC collection, or you have AutoCAD with specialized tool sets, in the AutoCAD architecture, there is this extra one. So it's called Project Navigator. Unfortunately, the just like vanilla CAD or CAD LT doesn't have this, but it is pretty handy. If you get used to the sheet set manager, it's basically the same, just a little bit extra stuff that you can do with it. So we can organize our sheets and our drawings, but we can also link drawing and sheet numbers for our detailed drawings, which is pretty handy. And I'll show you why that's so handy. So similar, it's going to be at the top here. So it's just called Project Navigator. If we go into our floor plans, we can save this just as basically general stuff. We'll just name it whatever we want it to be. Go next. We'll just select our layers and we'll just say finish. So now in our dropdown, we can see all those views that we created from before. And basically we can start to hop to them like just as we were doing before. We can hop back and forth between them, which is handy. But the good thing about this one is for our sheets, we can create a new sheet. And we'll just, like for our kitchen plans, basically. We'll say okay. And it's created another file basically for us. So I'll just open that up. So you can see it's in a new tab. I'll just get rid of that. It's just using a different layout and a different title block. But you can see right away it's picking up that information that we put in, similar to that sheet set manager. So now if we just go back in here, we can actually create a detailed view. So similar to the named views, we'll just go to our callouts and just pick this one. I'll just pick the whole kitchen just to show you. So basically you just select an area that you want it to be, and then it will actually create a little callout bubble for you. So just place it wherever you want it to be and name it accordingly. And then we don't need this for now. And we can, the good thing about this is that we can actually specify the scale. So whereas before it kind of blew up on us in paper space, we don't have to worry about that because they'll always be there. So now it's basically just asking for where you want it in model space. And I'll just adjust this so we can kind of see it a little bit better. And I'll just delete that one just so that it's bigger for us so that we can see how it acts in a second. So that's going to populate based off of wherever we put it on the sheet. If we go back into our kitchen details file, we can do that drag and drop thing that we did before. It'll go in at the appropriate scale this time because we specified it to. And you'll see that it's been created there. So we don't have to worry about it. And it's basically just taking whatever's there. And you can see that it's drawing number 1 on AO3. And we could just adjust this little guy here. But basically it's already has those attributes and it already knows which file it's on. You'll see that you can reload it. Basically it's created it as if it's an XREF. I can't see the changes, so don't worry about that. So yeah, so really quickly it can go into there. And we can also create the title block, or basically just use the title blocks that Autodesk already has. And we'll just insert this into our drawing, wherever we want it to be. And I'll just quickly move it into the appropriate location. I didn't do that properly. But again, this is attributed just like we played with just before. But it's smart because we can just drag and drop this into our kitchen details and it knows everything already. So it knows the drawing number, it knows that it's a kitchen details call out, it knows the scale, and it knows the sheet. So now whenever we start to move stuff, like or adjust that sheet number, similar to that, like what we did before, it's just hiding behind here. There we go. Similar to what we did before. But now it's just basically in here. It's just an extra tab that we have. And rename and renumber. So yeah, so just as we did before. If we wanted to change that to 103, for example, we'll say, okay, regenerate. That's changed. If we go to our little guy here that we created, that's changed. And if we go to our main file that had all of our details in it, you'll see once we regenerate that that's changed as well. So everything's basically linked and it basically just minimizes potential for error if we do start to move them to different ones. You'll see that this does give us a model space as well. But yeah, basically if we've ever moved this onto a different location, or maybe a secondary one, then it will just pick up all that information. Everything's basically linked together. So if you do have AEC or AutoCAD including specialized tool sets, it's definitely something to look into.